My name is Amanda, 36, and I was folding laundry when I got the call that Eleanor had died. My mother-in-law, the woman who'd made my life hell for 12 years, who'd tried to break up my marriage, who'd called me a gold digger at my own wedding reception, was gone. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow standing alone in her hospital room, staring at the letter addressed to me in her shaky handwriting. "Open this when I'm gone," it read. "And forgive me." You know that feeling when something seems too important to be happening just to you? That's exactly how I felt holding Eleanor's letter. If you're watching this from somewhere with a complicated family history, you probably understand. Life has a way of revealing its most shocking truths when we're least prepared. Before I tell you what was in that letter that changed everything, take a second to hit subscribe if you want more real family drama stories like mine. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. It's nothing like I could have ever imagined. I met my husband David Parker during our junior year of college. I was studying nursing, and he was in business administration. We literally bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. I spilled my latte all over his economics textbook. He asked me out instead of getting angry, and I knew right then he was different. Our romance was fast and intense. Within 6 months, we were talking about marriage after graduation. The first time I met Eleanor was during Parents' Weekend. David was so excited for me to meet his mom, but something felt off from the moment she looked at me. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. She hugged me, but it felt mechanical. When David stepped away to talk to a professor, she looked me up and down and said, "He's going places, you know. His father and I have connections. Don't hold him back." I was stunned. What had I done to make her dislike me so quickly? I told myself it was just protectiveness. She'd come around once she got to know me. She didn't. When David proposed after graduation, Eleanor's response was to ask if we could wait a few years until he's established. When we set a date anyway, she suddenly had health concerns that mysteriously disappeared after we agreed to postpone for 3 months. Every decision became a battle. The venue wasn't prestigious enough. The guest list was missing important business contacts. My dress was a bit much for someone with your figure. The wedding itself was beautiful despite her interference, but the reception became infamous in both our families. Eleanor had been drinking champagne steadily since the ceremony. During her speech, she raised her glass and said, "To David and Amanda, may she appreciate the life you can give her." Then, thinking her microphone was off, she turned to my aunt and said, "Classic gold digger move, getting pregnant to trap him." I wasn't pregnant. We hadn't even started trying yet. David was mortified. He confronted her, and she claimed it was a joke that came out wrong. He accepted this explanation because that's what David did. He made excuses for her. "That's just how she is," became his mantra. "She had to raise me alone after Dad died. She's protective." For 12 years, I endured Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments, her surprise visits to check on us, her criticism of my housekeeping, my cooking, my career choices. She bought me exercise equipment for Christmas. She sent me articles about fertility treatments when we struggled to conceive. She told our friends I was career-obsessed when I was promoted to head pediatric nurse at our hospital. David witnessed some of it, but never enough to understand the full pattern. When I tried to explain, he'd get defensive. "She doesn't mean it that way," or "You're being too sensitive." Our marriage was solid in so many ways, but Eleanor was our blind spot, our open wound. When she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last year, I felt terrible for feeling relieved that she'd have less energy to interfere in our lives. But cancer is a cruel teacher. Watching her deteriorate made it impossible to hold onto anger. I found myself driving her to chemotherapy appointments when David couldn't. I organized her medications. I coordinated with her doctors. Not because I'd suddenly forgiven everything, but because it was the right thing to do. David was scheduled to fly to Tokyo for an important business meeting the week her conditions suddenly worsened. I insisted he go. The meeting could secure his partnership at the firm. Eleanor was stable, just weak. The doctors said she had weeks, maybe months. They were wrong. 3 days after David left, the hospital called at 2 a.m. Eleanor was fading quickly. By the time I arrived, She was unconscious. I sat beside her bed alone, holding her frail hand as her breathing slowed and eventually stopped. The nurse noted the time of death and left me to say goodbye. That's when I noticed the envelope peeking out from her personal belongings bag. My name was written on it in handwriting I recognized from years of passive-aggressive birthday cards. I pulled it out, staring at it in the dim hospital light. Open this when I'm gone, and forgive me. I slipped the letter into my purse and handled the immediate arrangements in a fog. I called David, who was devastated he couldn't get a flight home for 2 days. I contacted the funeral home Eleanor had prearranged. I cleaned out her hospital room. For 3 days, that unopened letter burned a hole in my bedside drawer. Part of me was afraid it contained one final attack, a posthumous list of my failings as a wife and daughter-in-law. Another part hoped for the apology I'd never received in life. I decided to wait for David to return. Whatever Eleanor had to say, we would face it together. David arrived home jet-lagged and grief-stricken. After a shower and a few hours of restless sleep, he asked about the funeral arrangements I'd made. We sat at our kitchen table reviewing the details when I finally mentioned the letter. She left this for me, I said, placing the envelope between us. I wanted to wait for you to open it. He stared at it, recognition flashing across his face. That's Mom's handwriting. I know. She wrote, open this when I'm gone. And forgive me. David's hand trembled slightly as he reached for it. Forgive her? That doesn't sound like Mom. Do you want to open it, or should I? I asked. Together, he said. I slid my finger under the seal and pulled out several folded pages and what looked like old documents. The letter was dated 3 months ago, around when Eleanor entered hospice care. Dear Amanda, asterisk, if you're reading this, I'm gone. First, I want to say what I never could in life. I'm sorry. I've treated you terribly for reasons that had nothing to do with you. You've been a good wife to David, and I was wrong about you in every way. Asterisk, what I'm about to share will shock you both, but it's time for the truth. Asterisk, before I met David's father, when I was 16, I got pregnant. My parents sent me to a home for unwed mothers, and I gave birth to a baby boy whom I gave up for adoption. His name was James. This was my deepest shame, my most painful secret. Only David's father knew, and we both agreed never to speak of it again. We were blessed with David 2 years into our marriage, and I thought my past was behind me. Asterisk then, during David's junior year of college, a young man contacted me. It was James. He'd found me through the adoption agency's records once he turned 18. I was terrified David would discover my shameful secret, but I agreed to meet James privately. Asterisk, he wasn't interested in a relationship. He was angry, bitter about being abandoned. He showed me pictures of his difficult childhood in foster care after his adoptive parents died in a car accident when he was 8. He blamed me for everything that went wrong in his life. Asterisk, when I tried to explain I'd been a teenager with no support, he laughed. He'd investigated me and knew I had a perfect life now, successful husband, beautiful home, respected in the community. He said I didn't deserve any of it after what I'd done to him. Asterisk, that's when the blackmail began. At first, it was small amounts, but it escalated. He threatened to tell everyone my secret, to approach David and introduce himself if I didn't pay. I was terrified of losing my family's respect, especially after Harold died, and David was all I had left. Asterisk, then David brought you home, Amanda. You were kind, intelligent, and confident, everything I wanted to be at your age, but never was. You reminded me so much of myself before my mistake, before the shame. I convinced myself you'd judge me if you knew the truth. Worse, I feared your nursing background would make you notice things about James if you ever met him, his mannerisms so similar to David's, the family resemblance I could see clearly. Asterisk, so I pushed you away before you could get too close. I told myself I was protecting our family's reputation, but really, I was protecting myself from facing my past. Every time you showed compassion toward me, even during my illness, my guilt deepened, and with it, my resentment. Asterisk, James continued demanding money, threatening to reveal himself to David. He delighted in giving me updates about David's life, details he could only know by watching him. Watching both of you. I lived in constant fear that he would destroy the life David had built. Asterisk in this envelope, you'll find proof of everything I've told you. My original adoption paperwork, photos of James from our meetings, and bank statements showing my payments to him. You'll also find his current identity and address. His name is now James Peterson, and he lives in Riverside, just 20 minutes from your home. Asterisk, I need you both to know I've loved David more than anything in this world. Everything I did, no matter how misguided, was to protect him from my mistakes. But James is dangerous in ways I didn't initially understand. His hatred has consumed him. During our last meeting, he spoke about David with such envy and malice that I became frightened for your safety. Asterisk David, please forgive me for never telling you about your half-brother. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself from your judgment. Asterisk Amanda, please forgive me for all the pain I caused you. You deserved a mother-in-law who appreciated your strength and kindness. Asterisk, be careful. James is still watching you both. He's closer than you think. Asterisk with love and regret. Asterisk Eleanor. Asterisk attached to the letter were yellowed adoption papers from 1968, recent bank statements showing regular withdrawals of $2,000 to $5,000 marked only as family maintenance, and 3 photographs. The first showed a teenage Eleanor holding a baby. The second was a driver's license photo of a man around David's age, but with harder features. The third was most disturbing. A long-range photo of David and me entering our favorite restaurant, clearly taken without our knowledge. David stared at the documents, his face ashen. This can't be real, he whispered. Dad would have told me if Mom had another child. Your dad knew, I said gently. According to the letter, they both kept it secret. A brother. David touched the driver's license photo. I have a half-brother who hates me for having the life he didn't get. His voice cracked. And he's been watching us. I reached for his hand. I'm so sorry, David. All these years, he continued, I defended her behavior toward you. I thought she was just overprotective because of losing Dad. But she was being manipulated, blackmailed. He looked up at me, eyes swimming with tears. And she was horrible to you because she was afraid you'd discover her secret. The realization that Eleanor's treatment of me hadn't been personal was oddly liberating. For years, I'd wondered what I'd done wrong, how I could fix it. Now I understood there was nothing to fix. I'd been caught in the crossfire of Eleanor's guilt and James's revenge. What do we do about him? I asked, pointing to James's photo. David shook his head, anger replacing shock. Nothing. He blackmailed a dying woman. He's not my brother in any way that matters. But as I watched David push the documents away and walk to pour himself a drink, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Eleanor's final warning echoed in my mind. He's still watching you both. He's closer than you think. The next few days passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and grief. David alternated between shock, anger, and profound sadness. At the funeral, he delivered a moving eulogy about Eleanor's dedication as a single mother, careful to maintain the image she'd worked so hard to protect. I scanned the attendees nervously, wondering if James might be there, watching us, but saw no one matching his photo. After the guests left, David collapsed on our couch, emotionally exhausted. I keep thinking about what she went through all those years, he said. Raising me alone after Dad died, all while being blackmailed by this person. Why didn't she tell me? I could have helped her. She was ashamed, I said, and afraid of losing your respect. Nothing could make me stop loving her, he insisted. She was my mother. I know, I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. David had placed Eleanor on a pedestal his entire life. Learning she'd kept such significant secrets might have changed how he saw her, which was exactly what she feared. That night, while David finally slept, I took out Eleanor's documents again. Something about James Peterson nagged at me. If he'd been watching us for years, as Eleanor claimed, how close had he gotten? Had we ever met him without knowing who he was? The next morning, I told David I needed to run errands. Partly true, but my main goal was to begin investigating James without worrying David further. He was struggling enough with grief and betrayal. At the local library, I used a public computer to search for James Peterson. I found him immediately, a successful investment advisor with his own firm in Riverside. His company website featured a professional headshot that matched the driver's license photo Eleanor had provided. According to his bio, he'd graduated from the State University with honors in finance and built his business from scratch. There was no mention of foster care or adoption. Next, I checked social media. His accounts were mostly professional, but scrolling back several years revealed something disturbing. In the background of several photos, I recognized locations near our home, the park where David and I walked our dog, restaurants we frequented, even the exterior of David's office building. These weren't coincidental. James had been documenting his surveillance. Most chilling was a photo from 7 years ago, tagged at the Westbrook Hotel. That was our wedding venue. I zoomed in on the image, studying the background, and felt my blood freeze. James was wearing a photographer's assistant badge. He had been at our wedding, witnessing Eleanor's public insult, probably enjoying her cruelty toward me. I drove to the bank where Eleanor had kept her accounts. As the co-executor of her will alongside David, I had legal access. The manager helped me review her statements going back 5 years. The pattern was clear. Monthly withdrawals labeled family maintenance ranging from $2,000 to $5,000, totaling over $200,000. These payments had increased as her illness progressed. There was something else, a safe deposit box I hadn't known about. The manager explained I would need to return with David to access it, since we were co-executors. I made a mental note to find the right moment to mention it. When I returned home, David was on the phone with his business partner Marcus. They'd been close friends since business school and had built their financial consulting firm together over the past decade. David hung up looking stressed. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just some concerns about the Takeda contract from the Tokyo trip," he said. "Marcus thinks there might be irregularities in their financial disclosures." "Nothing I can't handle." I hesitated, then decided to share what I'd found. "I looked into James Peterson today." David's expression hardened. "Why would you do that without telling me?" "I was worried," I admitted. "Your mother seemed genuinely afraid of him." "My mother was dying and probably not thinking clearly," he said dismissively. "This guy took advantage of her guilt, but he's not our problem now that she's gone." "David, he was at our wedding. As a photographer's assistant." That got his attention. "What? How do you know that?" I showed him the social media post I'd saved to my phone. David studied it, his face paling. "He's been following us for years," I continued. "There are photos taken near our home, your office, places we regularly visit." "This is insane," David muttered. "We need to go to the police." "And tell them what?" "That your long-lost brother, who is blackmailing your mother, has been taking photos in public places?" "That's not illegal, just disturbing." David ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "So, we do nothing?" "We stay alert," I said. "And there's something else. Your mother had a safe deposit box I didn't know about. We should check it together since we're both executors." "Fine," he sighed. "Let's go tomorrow. But after that, I want to put this whole thing behind us. Mom is gone, her blackmailer can't hurt her anymore, and we need to move forward." I agreed, but privately, I couldn't shake my unease. That night, I dreamed of James standing in our bedroom doorway, watching us sleep. The next morning, my phone pinged with an email notification from our joint account. Our monthly statement was available. I logged in to pay bills and froze. There had been large transfers from our savings to an account I didn't recognize, totaling $50,000 over the past month. The most recent was dated during David's Tokyo trip. When I confronted David, he looked confused, then alarmed. "I didn't make those transfers. Could it be a bank error?" We called the bank immediately. The representative confirmed the transfers had been authorized using David's credentials and security questions. Someone had accessed our account, and they had information only David should know. "It has to be James," I said after we hung up. "He's making his move now that Eleanor is gone." David shook his head, still resistant. It could be identity theft. It happens all the time. This isn't random, I insisted. This is targeted. We need to look in that safe deposit box today. Before we could leave, David received an urgent call from Marcus. After a tense conversation, David hung up, looking devastated. The Tokyo deal is collapsing, he said. The Takeda Group is accusing us of misrepresenting our company's holdings. They're threatening to sue. As David made frantic calls to the office, I went to check our mail. Among the condolence cards was a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Smart girl. Keep digging. I stared at the note, my heart pounding. James knew I was investigating him. I had to find out what Eleanor had stored in that safe deposit box before it was too late. The bank manager led us to a private room with Eleanor's safe deposit box. Inside, we found more photos of James surveilling us, copies of the blackmail payments, and most disturbingly, a USB drive. We took everything home to examine properly. The USB contained audio recordings Eleanor had secretly made of her meetings with James over the past year. In the most recent, dated just weeks before her death, James said something that made my blood run cold. Your precious David has no idea what's coming. I've been patient, Eleanor. 12 years building the perfect revenge. Marcus has been very helpful. Money really can buy loyalty. By this time next month, David will lose everything. His company, his reputation, his wife. I wonder if he'll feel even a fraction of what I felt growing up with nothing. Eleanor's weak voice replied, Please, James. David never hurt you. Take whatever you want from me, but leave them alone. James laughed. Too late for that. The plan is already in motion. David's signature is on everything. He'll take the fall, not Marcus. As for Amanda, she's smarter than you give her credit for. I've enjoyed watching her. Maybe when this is over, she'll appreciate a man who knows what he really wants. The recording ended with Eleanor crying. David sat motionless, the color drained from his face. Marcus is working with him? My best friend and business partner for 15 years? I squeezed his hand. We need to confront James directly. These recordings might not be admissible in court since Eleanor made them without his knowledge, but we need to understand what we're dealing with. It's too dangerous, David argued. You heard him. He's been planning this for years. Which is why we need to act now, I insisted. Your business is under attack. Our savings are being drained, and he's only getting started. After much debate, I convinced David to let me meet James alone. We agreed I would suggest a meeting at a public cafe to discuss Eleanor's estate, implying I hadn't shared the letter with David. I would wear a hidden recording device, this time legally, with my knowledge and consent. The next day, I sat nervously at a corner table in Riverside's busiest cafe, wearing a recording device disguised as a decorative brooch. James arrived precisely on time, every bit the successful businessman in his tailored suit. Up close, the resemblance to David was more pronounced, same jawline, same way of carrying himself, but his eyes were different. Cold. Calculating. Amanda, he greeted me with a practiced smile, extending his hand. I appreciate you reaching out. My condolences on Eleanor's passing. I shook his hand, fighting a shiver. Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd come. He settled into the chair across from me. I was intrigued. You mentioned Eleanor's estate? Yes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She left some documents that mentioned you. James's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Did she? I'm surprised. Eleanor and I had a complicated relationship. She said you were her son, I continued. Given up for adoption. He studied me for a long moment. She told you that in a letter, I assume? Did you show it to David?
Not yet, Elite.
I wanted to understand the situation first. James smiled, seemingly pleased with my answer. Smart. David always did say you were the practical one. His casual reference to conversations about me sent another chill down my spine. So, it's true then? I pressed. You're David's half-brother? James took a sip of his coffee. Biologically speaking, yes. though I never had the privileges that came with the Parker name. Eleanor said you had a difficult childhood. Difficult is a polite word for it, he replied, his tone hardening slightly. My adoptive parents died when I was young. Foster care was educational. Let's just say I learned early that family isn't about blood, it's about who benefits you. Is that why you were blackmailing Eleanor? The direct question didn't faze him. I prefer to think of it as collecting delayed child support. She owed me. And following us for years? Taking photos? Infiltrating our wedding? Did she owe you that too? I could hear the anger creeping into my voice. James leaned forward, dropping all pretense. I needed to understand my enemy. David got everything that should have been mine: loving parents, financial security, respected position, beautiful wife. His eyes lingered on me in a way that made my skin crawl. I simply wanted to know what I was taking back. Taking back, I echoed. Eleanor didn't tell you everything, did she? He smiled coldly. I've been working with Marcus for over 3 years. David's company has been making phantom investments, on paper at least. His signatures are on everything. When the authorities investigate, and they will very soon, David will face fraud charges while Marcus walks away with millions. The Tokyo contract was the final piece, setting David up to take full responsibility. My hand trembled around my coffee cup. Why tell me this? Because it's too late to stop it, he said with casual cruelty. The complaints have already been filed. The paper trail leads directly to David. And you, he studied me, you're collateral damage. Unless you're smarter than I think. What does that mean? It means David is finished. But you don't have to go down with him. You've put up with Eleanor's abuse for years. You've supported David while he defended her. Maybe it's time to think about yourself. I stared at him, suddenly understanding. Are you suggesting I abandon my husband and, what? Join you? James shrugged. You'd be surprised how many wives jump ship when fraud investigations begin. No one would blame you. And I've always admired your resilience. The predatory look in his eyes made his meaning clear. I felt nauseated but forced myself to maintain composure. I'll need time to think, I said carefully. This is a lot to process. Don't take too long, he advised, standing to leave. Things will move quickly now. He tossed cash on the table for his coffee. Oh, and Amanda? I know you're recording this conversation. He tapped his ear slightly. Professional habit to scan for devices. But go ahead and keep it. David won't believe you anyway. I've made sure of that. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? Check his email, James said with a smirk. Specifically, the ones between you and Marcus that David received this morning. Very convincing, even with the intimate details. Technology is amazing these days. He walked away, leaving me frozen in my seat. I immediately tried calling David, but he didn't answer. I raced home to find clothes missing from his closet and a note on our bed. I know the truth. Don't try to contact me. James had been one step ahead all along. He'd fabricated evidence of an affair between Marcus and me, knowing it would devastate David and prevent us from working together against him. And David, already reeling from his mother's revelations, had believed it. I stood in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd built together, and realized I was now fighting alone. If you've ever had that moment when you realize someone had been playing a long game to destroy everything you love, then you know exactly how I felt standing there. I was up against someone who had spent years plotting our downfall, and I had just lost my strongest ally. But sometimes when we're cornered, we discover strengths we never knew we had. What would you do if you were me? Would you give up or fight back? Stay with me as the story takes an even more unexpected turn. With David unreachable and refusing to answer my calls, I had to act quickly. Our joint accounts had already been drained, but I remembered the emergency credit card we kept locked in our fireproof safe for true crises. This certainly qualified. I used the card to hire Patrick Donnelly, a private investigator recommended by a doctor I worked with at the hospital. I gave him copies of everything we'd found in Eleanor's safe deposit box, explained the situation, and asked him to focus on 2 priorities: finding David and investigating the connection between James and Marcus. While Patrick worked, I took a personal leave from the hospital. I couldn't focus on patients while my life was imploding. I spent hours reviewing Eleanor's records, listening to her recordings, and searching for any clue that might help us. 3 days later, Patrick called with his first findings. "I've uncovered some disturbing information about James Peterson," he said. "For starters, his real name is Eric Bennett. The real James Peterson died 22 years ago at age 8. Records show he drowned in a foster home swimming pool accident." "So, he's been living under a stolen identity?" I asked. "Yes, and it's not the first time he's done this. I found 3 other cases where he inserted himself into wealthy families by claiming to be a long-lost relative. Each time, he extracted money through blackmail or fraud before disappearing. But how did he know about Eleanor's actual son?" "That's where it gets interesting," Patrick continued. "Eleanor really did have a child she gave up for adoption in 1968. But according to my sources, that child never attempted to contact her. Bennett likely works with someone at the adoption agency who provides him with information on potential targets, older people with secrets and money." This explained so much. Eleanor had been manipulated by a professional con artist who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push.
"There's more," Patrick said.
"I've been monitoring the financial transactions at Parker Financial Consulting. Someone has been systematically transferring funds to offshore accounts for months, using David's credentials. But the access points don't match David's known devices or locations. During his Tokyo trip, for instance, his credentials were used from a server in Riverside while he was demonstrably in Japan." "That's proof of fraud," I said, hope rising. "What about Marcus?" "That's where it gets complicated. Marcus Chapman has been making regular payments to a shell company that I've linked to Bennett. But he's also recently withdrawn nearly all his personal assets and appears to be preparing to leave the country. I believe Bennett has been blackmailing him too, but also setting him up as a secondary fall guy if things go wrong." "And David? Have you found him?" "Yes," Patrick confirmed. "He's staying at the Pine Grove Motel about 30 miles north. He's been there for 2 days, barely leaving his room except to buy alcohol. Based on my surveillance, he's not doing well." I thanked Patrick and immediately got in my car. The Pine Grove Motel was a rundown place just off the highway, the kind of place someone goes when they don't want to be found. I spotted David's car in the parking lot and knocked on the corresponding door. No answer. "David, it's me. I know you're in there. Please open the door." After several more attempts, the door finally cracked open. David looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, the smell of whiskey emanating from the room behind him. "How did you find me?" he asked flatly. "That doesn't matter," I said. "We need to talk." "I think you've said enough in your emails to Marcus," he replied bitterly. "Those emails are fake, David. James, or Eric Bennett, which is his real name, fabricated them to drive us apart." David laughed harshly.
"Right.
"I suppose the photos are fake too? The texts? The hotel receipts?" "Yes," I insisted. "All of it. I met with him yesterday. I recorded our conversation. I held up my phone. He admitted everything. He's not even your brother. He's a con artist who targeted your mother." David stared at me, wavering between anger and confusion. "Why should I believe you? Because in 12 years, have I ever given you reason not to? Please just listen." He stepped back, allowing me to enter the dismal room. Empty whiskey bottles and fast food containers littered the small table. I sat on the edge of the bed and played the recording of my conversation with Bennett. David listened, his expression changing from skepticism to shock as Bennett casually detailed his plan to destroy our lives. When it finished, David sat heavily in the room's only chair. "He's been planning this for years," David whispered. "Using my mother, manipulating Marcus, setting me up to take the fall for fraud I knew nothing about. The PI I hired found evidence that Bennett has done this before to other families," I explained. "And he confirmed that Marcus has been moving his personal assets offshore. Bennett is blackmailing him too, but also setting him up as a secondary scapegoat." David put his head in his hands. "I've lost everything, Amanda. The company is under investigation. My reputation is ruined. I believed those emails because everything else in my life was falling apart. I couldn't bear one more betrayal. I knelt before him, taking his hands in mine. You haven't lost everything. You haven't lost me. And we're going to fight back.
How?
The despair in his voice broke my heart. He's thought of everything. Not everything, I said firmly. We have Eleanor's recordings. We have proof that someone used your credentials from Riverside while you were verifiably in Tokyo. We have the PI's evidence linking Bennett to previous cons. David looked up, a faint spark returning to his eyes. None of that will be enough in court. Then we need more, I said. Patrick mentioned a safe deposit key in your mother's documents that we missed. It's for a different bank across town. David's brow furrowed. I never knew about another safe deposit box. Your mother was more strategic than we realized. I think she knew Bennett would eventually try to destroy you and was gathering evidence against him. For the first time, David straightened, some of his natural determination returning. Let's go check it. As we drove to the bank, I filled David in on everything the PI had discovered. Bennett wasn't just targeting us. He had made a career of destroying families for profit. This wasn't about revenge for childhood abandonment. It was a calculated financial scheme with us, as the latest victims. At the bank, we discovered Eleanor's second safe deposit box contained exactly what we needed, a comprehensive file she'd been building on Bennett for years. It included a detailed journal documenting his threats and demands, photos he didn't know she had taken of their meetings, and, most importantly, DNA test results. She had him tested? David asked, examining the papers. Not with his knowledge, I explained, reading Eleanor's notes. She collected a glass he drank from during one of their meetings. The results show conclusively he's not related to your family at all. David shook his head in disbelief. She knew he was a fraud, but she kept paying him anyway? According to her journal, she discovered the truth about 6 months ago, but played along to gather evidence.
She was trying to protect you, David.
She knew he was targeting your business. Among the documents was also a letter from Eleanor's private investigator with a bombshell revelation. Bennett had approached 3 other executives at competing firms before successfully recruiting Marcus. He had systematically sought someone with access to Parker Financial Consulting who could be compromised. My mother was trying to save me all along, David said quietly. And I never knew. She made mistakes, I acknowledged, but she loved you. In the end, she did everything she could to protect you from Bennett. As we drove home, a plan began to form. The evidence Eleanor had gathered wasn't enough for an immediate arrest, but it gave us leverage. With Patrick's help, we might be able to trap Bennett and Marcus, exposing their scheme before David's reputation was completely destroyed. We need to go to the FBI, I said. This crosses state lines and involves financial fraud. David nodded, his resolve strengthening. And I need to contact our company's security team immediately to lock down any further access to our systems. For the first time since Eleanor's death, we were working together against a common enemy. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but we finally understood what we were fighting against, and for. When we arrived home, David noticed something I'd overlooked, a small key taped to the back of Eleanor's journal with a note. Storage Unit 247, West Side Facility. Final insurance. One more stop, David said, his eyes showing determination I hadn't seen in weeks. At the storage facility, Unit 247 contained a single filing cabinet. Inside were dozens of files documenting Bennett's activities over the past 5 years, not just against us, but other families as well. Eleanor had been more thorough than we could have imagined. She'd hired not 1 but 3 private investigators to build a comprehensive case against Bennett, anticipating he would make his move after her death. Most crucially, she had recorded phone conversations between Bennett and Marcus discussing their plan to frame David. These recordings, unlike the ones she'd made of her meetings with Bennett, were legally obtained through a private investigator with proper authorization. She knew, David said, emotion catching in his throat. She knew exactly what would happen and prepared for it, all while dying of cancer. I squeezed his hand. She was trying to make amends, in her own way. We took everything to FBI Special Agent Harlow, who specialized in complex financial fraud cases. After reviewing our evidence, she agreed Bennett's pattern of behavior warranted immediate investigation. This is a sophisticated operation, she explained. But he's made mistakes. Using the same basic playbook multiple times creates a pattern we can use against him. Agent Harlow proposed a sting operation. David would appear to have a complete breakdown, making him seem vulnerable. I would approach Bennett, claiming to have discovered additional evidence in Eleanor's possessions that could exonerate David, but implicate Bennett. The goal was to get Bennett to incriminate himself on tape, ideally with Marcus present. It was risky, but it was our best chance to clear David's name before the fraud allegations became public and irreparably damaged his reputation. As we left the FBI office, David pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry I doubted you," he whispered against my hair. "I should have known you'd never betray me. We're going to get through this, I promised. Together." For the first time since finding Eleanor's letter, I felt real hope. The woman who had made my life miserable for 12 years had, in her final act, given us the tools to save ourselves from destruction. The FBI moved quickly, helping us set up the sting operation. The plan was straightforward but dangerous. I would contact Bennett, claiming to be desperate and angry with David after his abandonment. I would suggest that Eleanor had left additional documents that could protect me financially in the coming scandal, but that I needed his help to understand them. Agent Harlow fitted me with a sophisticated recording device and placed agents in strategic locations near the meeting point. A private room at an upscale restaurant Bennett frequented. David would be monitoring from a surveillance van, along with other agents. "Be careful," David warned as we prepared. "Bennett is smart. He'll be suspicious." "He's also arrogant," I countered. "He thinks he's won. People make mistakes when they're celebrating victory." When I called Bennett, he seemed amused by my situation. "I told you David wouldn't handle the pressure well," he said smoothly. "Men rarely do." "You were right," I replied, forcing my voice to sound defeated. "He's cleared out our accounts and disappeared. The FBI has been asking questions about the company. I'm afraid I'll lose everything because of his actions." "How unfortunate," Bennett said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "What do you expect me to do about it?" "Eleanor left some financial documents I don't understand," I explained. "Investment accounts I didn't know about. I think they might be protected from seizure if David is charged with fraud. I need someone with financial expertise to help me access them before it's too late." There was a pause before Bennett responded. "I might be able to assist. For a fee, of course." "Of course," I agreed readily. 20% of whatever we can recover." We arranged to meet the following evening. As a final touch, I added, "Could you bring Marcus? I have questions about the company's structure that might affect these investments." "Marcus is lying low right now," Bennett said cautiously. "Please," I begged. I trusted him. He's the only one from the company who might actually help me. Bennett eventually agreed, his greed overcoming his caution. The next evening, I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, allowing the FBI to make final preparations. I was nervous but focused, reviewing the key points Agent Harlow had coached me on. Get Bennett to explicitly confirm his identity fraud, his blackmail of Eleanor, and his plan to frame David. Bennett arrived precisely on time, with a reluctant-looking Marcus trailing behind him. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes as they sat down across from me. "Amanda," Bennett greeted me with his practiced charm. "You're looking well, considering the circumstances." "Let's skip the pleasantries," I replied coldly. "I need help, not conversation." Bennett smiled, seemingly appreciating my directness. "Very well. What are these documents Eleanor supposedly left you?" I removed a folder from my bag, one prepared by the FBI containing actual financial statements from Eleanor's estate, but modified to suggest hidden accounts. "Before we start," I said, "I need to know exactly what's happening with David's company." The FBI agents who questioned me mentioned serious fraud charges. "Marcus, is that true?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. The company's finances were mismanaged. David authorized investments that didn't exist. Except he didn't, did he? I fixed my gaze on Bennett. You did, using his credentials. Just like you've done before with other families, Eric. Bennett's smile faltered slightly at the use of his real name. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you, Eric Bennett? The same Eric Bennett who assumed the identity of a dead foster child named James Peterson? The same man who has targeted at least 3 other wealthy families with similar cons. Bennett's expression hardened. Be careful, Amanda. Accusations like that could be dangerous. Not as dangerous as the evidence Eleanor collected against you, I countered. She knew you weren't her son. She had DNA tests done without your knowledge. Bennett glanced at Marcus, who looked increasingly uneasy. Whatever game you're playing, you're outmatched, Bennett said coldly. Even if what you're suggesting were true, you have no proof that would stand in court. Don't I? I removed a second folder. This one containing copies of some of Eleanor's actual evidence. Eleanor was more thorough than you realized. She documented everything. The blackmail, your threats, your collaboration with Marcus to frame David. Marcus paled. You said no one would ever find out, he hissed at Bennett. You promised this would look like David's doing entirely. Shut up, Bennett snapped before turning back to me. What do you want, Amanda? Money? Is that it? I want to know why, I said simply. Why target our family? Why spend years planning to destroy David? Bennett leaned back, studying me. After a moment, he seemed to make a calculation. Why not? It was profitable, and your husband's company was the perfect vehicle. Marcus here was easy to compromise once I discovered his gambling debts. Marcus looked down at his hands. He said he just wanted insider information at first. Then it escalated. It always does with him, I said. He's done this before, Marcus. You're just another tool he's using, and he'll discard you when it's convenient. That's enough, Bennett cut in sharply. Let's be practical. What will it take for these documents to disappear, Amanda? Name your price. I want full confession of what you did, I said. How you stole the identity of James Peterson, how you blackmailed Eleanor with lies about being her son, and how you framed David for financial crimes he knew nothing about. Bennett laughed. And why would I do that? Because I've already given copies of Eleanor's evidence to the FBI, I bluffed. Your only chance to negotiate a better deal is to cooperate now, before they come for you. For the first time, I saw genuine concern in Bennett's eyes. He glanced toward the exit, calculating. She's lying, he told Marcus. The FBI would be here if they had anything substantial. On cue, Agent Harlow approached our table, showing her badge. Eric Bennett? We have some questions regarding identity fraud, blackmail, and financial crimes. Bennett's face contorted with rage. He lunged across the table, grabbing for my throat, but was immediately tackled by an agent who had been posing as a waiter. Marcus simply put his head in his hands, defeated. Within minutes, both men were in handcuffs. As they were led away, Bennett called back to me. This isn't over, Amanda. Not by a long shot. But it was over. The FBI search of Bennett's home and office yielded a trove of incriminating evidence, not just against David, but against previous victims as well. They found falsified documents, identity theft materials, and offshore account information that corroborated everything in Eleanor's files. Marcus, facing serious charges himself, agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for leniency. He provided complete details of how Bennett had first approached him, exploited his gambling debts, and gradually drawn him into the fraud scheme. His testimony, combined with Eleanor's evidence, built an airtight case. Over the following weeks, the FBI uncovered the full extent of Bennett's operation. He had targeted at least 5 other families using similar tactics, researching family secrets, assuming the identity of long-lost relatives, and systematically extracting money through blackmail or fraud. In 2 cases, he had successfully stolen millions before disappearing and assuming a new identity. 3 months after the arrests, we sat in a courtroom watching Bennett and Marcus stand trial. The prosecution presented a devastating case, including Eleanor's recordings, the FBI's evidence, and testimony from Bennett's previous victims who had been located during the investigation. Bennett remained defiant throughout, showing no remorse. When given the opportunity to speak, he looked directly at me and said, "I chose the wrong family this time, but others won't make my mistake." The judge was unimpressed. Bennett received 25 years for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, blackmail, and attempted assault. Marcus, due to his cooperation, received a reduced sentence of 8 years. As we left the courthouse, I caught sight of a woman watching us from across the street, the same determined expression I'd seen in Eleanor's photos. One of the FBI agents noticed my attention and explained, "That's Catherine Reed, Bennett's ex-wife. She's been helping us locate other victims." The agent introduced us, and Catherine shook my hand firmly. "Your mother-in-law was remarkable," she said. "She contacted me last year after figuring out who Eric really was. We compared notes, and that's how she built such a comprehensive case." "You knew him well?" David asked. Catherine's expression darkened.
Too well.
"I was married to him for 2 years before I discovered the real Eric Bennett died in a car accident 15 years ago. My husband was actually Daniel Mercer, wanted in 3 states for fraud. When I threatened to report him, he emptied our accounts and disappeared." She smiled grimly. "I've been helping authorities track him ever since." "How many identities has he had?" I asked. "At least 6 that we know of," Catherine replied. "He's a true sociopath. No empathy, no remorse, just a talent for finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them." Her words reminded me of Eleanor's letter. "His hatred has consumed him." But it wasn't hatred driving Bennett. It was cold calculation and a complete lack of human connection. As Catherine walked away, David took my hand. "We owe my mother everything," he said quietly. "She saved us." I nodded, finally understanding the complicated woman who had been my adversary for so long. In her final act, Eleanor had transformed from my greatest critic to our unlikely savior. 6 months after the trial, David and I stood before Eleanor's grave, placing fresh flowers against her headstone. The cemetery was peaceful, autumn leaves creating a golden canopy above us. "I brought something," David said, removing an envelope from his jacket. "A letter. I thought she should have it, even if she can't read it." He placed the sealed letter beside the flowers. I knew without asking that it contained his forgiveness for the secrets, the manipulations, and the pain she had caused. David had spent months processing the complicated truth of his mother, grieving both the woman he thought he knew and the one she actually was. "She would have been proud of how you've rebuilt," I said gently. After Bennett's conviction, David had worked tirelessly to restore his company's reputation. With Marcus's full confession and the FBI's public statement clearing David of wrongdoing, most clients had returned. Some relationships were irreparably damaged, but new opportunities had emerged as well. "It's strange," David replied, "but in some ways, I understand her better now than I ever did when she was alive. The fear of losing everything, of being judged for past mistakes, it makes people do desperate things." I nodded, thinking of Eleanor's journals, which we'd read together during the investigation. They revealed a woman constantly afraid, not just of Bennett's threats, but of losing her son's respect. Every criticism she had leveled at me stemmed from her own insecurities, her fear that I would somehow expose her vulnerabilities. "She was complicated," I acknowledged. "But she loved you. In the end, that's what mattered most." We walked hand in hand back to our car. The past 6 months had transformed us as well. The crisis had forced us to communicate more honestly, to rely on each other completely. Our marriage, tested by fire, had emerged stronger. We had sold our old house, unable to feel comfortable there knowing Bennett had watched us for years. Our new home was across town, a Victorian fixer-upper we were renovating together. The physical labor of restoration had become a form of therapy for both of us. As we drove away from the cemetery, David reached over to place his hand gently on my stomach. "How are you feeling today?" I smiled, covering his hand with mine. "Good. The morning sickness is finally easing up. After years of trying to conceive, I had discovered I was pregnant 2 months after the trial. The doctor suggested the stress of our situation might have been interfering with conception all along. Whatever the reason, the timing felt right. A new beginning after so much pain. Eleanor would have been thrilled, David said softly. Whatever her faults, she always wanted grandchildren. If it's a girl, we could use Eleanor as a middle name, I suggested. It was something I'd been considering for weeks, but hadn't voiced until now. David looked surprised, then thoughtful. You'd be willing to do that? After everything? She saved our family, I said simply. And she was trying in her own way to make amends at the end. I think it would be a fitting tribute. That evening, as David assembled furniture for the nursery, I sorted through a box of books we'd brought from Eleanor's house. Most would be donated, but a few classics David remembered from childhood would go on our baby's bookshelf. As I lifted an old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, a folded piece of paper fluttered to the floor. I recognized Eleanor's handwriting immediately and called David. We sat together on the nursery floor as I unfolded the note. It was dated just 2 weeks before her death. Amanda, asterisk if you're reading this, you've found what I hoped you would. I've left several notes hidden in my favorite books, little breadcrumbs leading to the truth. I knew James, or whatever his real name is, would move against David after I was gone. I've done what I can to prepare you both. Asterisk, I want you to know that despite my terrible behavior, I always saw your strength.
It intimidated me.
You were everything I wished I could have been at your age. Confident, compassionate, unashamed. I pushed you away because I was afraid you would see through me. Asterisk, I believe you will be the one to save David when the time comes. You have the courage I always lacked. Where I hid from my mistakes, you face challenges directly. It's what makes you an excellent nurse, a loyal wife, and what will make you a wonderful mother someday. Asterisk, please forgive an old woman's cruelty. And know that in my final days, I came to love you as the daughter I never had. Asterisk, Eleanor, asterisk, tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. David's arm tightened around me, his own eyes wet. She knew, I whispered. Somehow, she knew exactly how everything would unfold. She was always 3 steps ahead, David agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Even at the end. As we sat in the half-finished nursery, surrounded by the promise of new life, I felt Eleanor's presence not as an adversary, but as a guardian. The woman who had once been my greatest source of pain had become our unlikely protector, watching over us from beyond. That night, I placed Eleanor's note in a special box I was creating for our child, a collection of family mementos and stories that would someday explain their complicated heritage. Among the painful truths and difficult lessons was a powerful message about forgiveness, redemption, and the unexpected ways love manifests itself. The journey that began with a deathbed letter had transformed not just our circumstances, but our hearts. Eleanor's final gift hadn't been the evidence that saved us from Bennett. It had been the opportunity to see beyond surface judgments to the complicated, flawed humanity beneath. As I drifted to sleep beside David, my hand resting protectively over our growing child, I no longer felt hollow when thinking of Eleanor. Instead, I felt grateful for the truth that had ultimately saved us, and for the mother-in-law who, in her final act, had become family in the truest sense of the word. If you've stayed with me through this incredible journey, I can't thank you enough. My story shows how family relationships can be the most complicated ones we navigate, full of misunderstandings, secrets, and sometimes unexpected redemption. Has anyone in your family ever surprised you by being completely different than you thought? Or have you discovered family secrets that changed your perspective? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real family stories. And if you know someone dealing with difficult in-laws or family drama, sharing this might help them see there's often more beneath the surface than we realize. Until next time, remember that even in our most broken family relationships, healing is possible. sometimes from the most unexpected sources.